Recently, we received an email at the RIU directing our attention to a video of a rather interesting phenomenon. The originator of the email had seen some of our previous work on volumetric shadows and thought that there might be some connection. In the description panel of his video, he asks for an explanation of the phenomenon he has captured. It is true that there are genuine similarities between his video and the one filmed by the idiot with his hand up my... Our simple demonstration was created in response to a discussion about the question of whether or not it would be possible to create a black laser beam. Can we run that video? We can? Ah, good. What you're seeing is something called a volumetric shadow. It's a shadow cast through a medium rather than upon a surface. It was very simple to produce, but a lot harder to film successfully. It's done by creating a white screen with a black dot near one corner and displaying the image through a projector. In order to see the shadow clearly, the room has been fogged up a little. When I was growing up, it was acceptable to smoke in the cinema, and I was fascinated by the volumetric lighting effects above my head. Kids these days are missing out. No wonder so many of them aren't interested in optics. The shadow caught on video by the person asking for an explanation wasn't caused by a single dot between the light source and viewer, but the contrail of a jet plane. In his video, the jet plane crossed the apparent disk of the sun and created a volumetric shadow right across the sky directly along its own path. Can we show his video? No? Ah. It seems we did ask for his permission, but he replied that he didn't want us to try to debunk chemtrails using his video. Doesn't that suggest that he already knows he's presenting bunk which won't stand scrutiny? His channel presents a number of videos with fractured crockery of equal calibre, and there's plenty more of it to be found on the net, especially on YouTube. I wanted to try to help him understand volumetric shadows, so I directed him to a useful page about contrail shadows on a website which explains many different types of atmospheric optical phenomena. And just for good measure, I also directed him to a website all about contrails, and how they form, how they behave, and how persistent contrails have been documented, described and photographed for at least the past 40 years. His response was a little incoherent, but the gist of it was that he was accusing those sites of being disseminaries of government disinformation. He is what is commonly known as a chemtard, and his symptoms suggest that he has quite an advanced condition. He's not unlike countless other chemtards in his misunderstandings and refusal to acknowledge the facts. Facts which could have been found with ease at the very sites to which he and countless others like him have been directed. Facts such as, persistent contrails have been described, documented and photographed for at least 40 years. Simply labelling something as government disinformation as an excuse to avoid reading those facts and seeing the evidence is a very poor cop-out. To then try to justify an errant belief by asking a question spewed forth by so many chemtards, how come this has never been seen before the 1990s, is ridiculous in the extreme. Let me repeat this again for the hard of thinking. Persistent contrails have been described, documented and photographed for at least 40 years. If you don't know that those fluffy things in the sky are called clouds, and that their shape, appearance and behaviour can vary depending upon their cause and the specific meteorological conditions in that volume of sky at the time, then you too may be susceptible to chemtardosis, and your sanity may be at risk. Chemtardosis is often comorbid with such conditions as 9/11 truthism and delusions of lizardocracy, but for the moment let's concentrate solely on the chemtardosis. Rabies is a terrible disease because it causes a desperately thirsty person or animal to be afraid of water. Not only does chemtardosis cause an irrational fear of water, but the sufferer often believes that volumetric shadows from contrails are some kind of guidance system or dark energy weapon. You muppets! I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes. These poor afflicted individuals are posting videos and photographs on the internet willfully ignorant of the amazing phenomenon they've been lucky enough to capture. Most chemtards probably won't be brave enough to watch this video all the way through, and by now will most likely have fled in search of their preferred brand of psychoceramics in order to make themselves feel better and ease the pain caused by being exposed to delusion-eroding facts. Now that they know that we don't share their fantasy, not even our picture of a juicy black beam is likely to hold their attention, although we did go to quite a lot of trouble to create it. Unfortunately, we were unable to borrow the hyperspatial workshop, because it was already occupied by an old guy who was muttering something about Norway. And he didn't have any rabbits for our chemtrail experiments either, but he was eager to let us have some white mice to drown. Test. Without the use of the hyperspatial workshop, we were unable to place our sun 93 million miles away, and we had to work with much less than 30,000 feet of atmosphere through which to cast our shadow. These limitations have had some effect on the way our black beam picture looks, but the principles behind it are no different to those responsible for the shadows which trigger hysteria in hordes of hopeless hydrophobes. Of course, because we weren't in the hyperspatial workshop, we couldn't use a full-size 737 either. Ooh, how could that be? How could this possibly be creating dark energy beams? It's not. It doesn't. It never did, and nor has any other aircraft anywhere but in fiction or the delusional mind of a chemtard. I bet that image is really painful to those of you afflicted by chemtardosis. Cognitive dissonance hurts, doesn't it? But no pain, no gain. If you want to be cured of your chemtardosis, a good meteorologist can help. Do any of you actually want to be cured? Do you? Or perhaps you want to continue feeling special, or maybe you enjoy the attention from other gullible crackpots. Because surely no one with at least a basic education and access to the net or a library could actually buy into that paranoid hogwash, could they? In the right conditions, a plane may leave behind a cloud. That's all it is, a cloud. You know that clouds can cast shadows, right? You've seen them racing across the landscape when you've been up a hill or some other high place, haven't you? Have you never seen sunbeams poking from the edges of a cloud? That's just another example of a volumetric shadow, although we tend to concentrate on the illuminated regions rather than the shadow when we spot sunbeams. For those wondering how a volumetric shadow could possibly be cast into a clear sky, think about it another way. Astronomers, as we know, prefer the clearest of atmospheric conditions, but they will often use a laser to point out planets, stars and constellations in a clear night sky. The atmosphere and the airborne particles it supports will scatter the light and make the laser beam visible. A shadow is simply a region with a reduced light level. If you understand that a medium will render light visible, then is it so hard to realise that you'd see a shadow where the medium isn't scattering as much light because less light is reaching that region? If the sky is flooded with light as it is during a clear day, then something blocking out a portion of that light, such as the contrail from a plane, may cast a volumetric shadow which you can see if you're in the right place at the right time. It really isn't so difficult to figure out if you think about it rationally instead of clinging desperately to whatever crackpot fantasies you might find on the net. If you use pseudoscientific terms in your web search, you're unlikely to find rational answers. If you search for claptrap, you'll find plenty of it. But if you're not interested in anything but claptrap, then please don't be so dishonest as to ask for a scientist to provide an explanation which you'd have no intention of even considering, let alone accepting, if by some miracle you were mentally equipped to understand it. And let's face it, I've seen preschool children able to comprehend a shadow, for crying out loud. If you really must be taken back to the basics which you should have known before you reached your teens, a good place to start would be to read about scattering and find out why the sky is blue and a sunset is red. But don't take my word for it. I'm not a real scientist. I'm just a puppet in a lab coat. Do the research instead of expecting to be spoon-fed and then spitting out whatever doesn't taste sweet. Here at the RIU, we've discovered aliens in domestic appliances and produced dark energy beams from a paper jet plane. On a stick! So, goodbye from me until next time. Make sure that you're subscribed if you want to stay informed about our latest videos. And don't forget to give us a thumbs up whilst we display links to some useful resources. Thank you.